little bit. It's still pretty cold out though. But what I'd like to do is introduce Ned. And as project manager for visualization of climate information for NOAA's Climate Program Office, Ned's coordinated design, evaluation, and day-to-day visualization production for NOAA's climate.gov portal, which is www.climate.gov. The portal is a multi-office effort to consolidate NOAA's climate holdings, including data, educational resources, decision makers' resources, and stories about people using climate information to make better decisions and to discover new frontiers in Earth system science. As a producer of video content, Dr. Gardiner has stepped into the shoes of broadcasters to produce relevant, timely content and to better understand production processes that will help the broadcasting community disseminate and use climate information. So let me show you a brief video that we produced, or Ned produced, to show you just a sample of what he does. Let's take a look.
NOAA produces monthly and seasonal forecasts that predict future climate conditions. John Gottschalk at NOAA's Climate Prediction Center describes these long-range forecasts.
When the user comes to the Climate Prediction Center long-range forecast website, they will see a forecast map for the temperature and precipitation for either the monthly or 3-month time period. The seasonal and monthly outlooks show the probability that temperature or precipitation will be above, near, or below average compared to a 30-year period, currently 1981 to 2010. The colors on the map highlight the most likely category, but not the only possible outcome. Here's how to interpret a CPC seasonal outlook. The region over Texas has a greater than 50% chance of experiencing above average temperatures during this season. That also means that the chance of this region seeing below average temperatures decreases to less than 17%, with a chance of near average temperatures remaining at 1/3. Even though the forecast favors above average temperatures, there's still a distinct chance for near average and below average conditions to occur in that area, just at a lower probability. Deeper colors within the shaded areas denote higher probabilities and greater confidence for the categories shown on the map. White areas on the maps denote regions where all 3 categories are equally likely. This forecast is called equal chances and means that there is a 1/3 probability of above, near, or below average conditions occurring. A climate forecast is not a weather forecast. These are forecasts for the most favored category of average conditions over a given time period, as opposed to a weather forecast, which is more deterministic or more focused on a shorter time period and more fine scale.
To read and interpret long-range forecast maps correctly, it's important to understand the concept of probability. That's a different way of interpreting maps for most people, but once you get the hang of it, you'll make better decisions in the long run. From the Climate Prediction Center, I'm Ned Gardiner. It's really a pleasure to be here, honestly. I've been learning on the job here at NOAA about the culture within NOAA and about the culture here in the broadcast meteorological community, and I'm really trying to listen to what you guys actually need and want to learn how better to serve you, because we know from surveys that you are trusted sources for people's safety and planning and understanding meteorological conditions. So we take very seriously your role in the public, and we know you have limited time on the air to present climate information, so we try to make it as easy as possible to do that when you can. Last year, one of the kind of hit videos that we had that got picked up, and Jennifer Francis used it in her talk, was this visualization of sea ice age, and it came up this morning already. Jennifer was asking about this. Here we're looking at oldest ice in white colors. This is multi-year ice because we have a long-term satellite record. We can, in fact, track the age of ice over time and show how the circulation of the ocean in the Arctic influences where ice gets distributed around the northern hemisphere. And what you're seeing here is the flow out of the Arctic Ocean over time of Arctic sea ice. And this is a reflection of Arctic amplification, the enhanced warming of the Arctic Ocean due to warming of global temperature. The Arctic is experiencing more warming than other regions of the world. And you can see that, especially here in this with precipitous drop-off of sea ice just in the last decade. I wanted to put this visualization in also as a nod to sort of our shared history with NASA and NOAA, because Dave Stroud and I were talking last night, excuse me, about sort of our shared history working with NASA and some of the great research that's been done over the last decades to understand, using our observational platforms, the climate history of Earth. And it is a shared responsibility across the government. I know each of you is in an individual market, and you need to make these global stories local. So let's talk a little bit about the state of Colorado. I'm going to quickly, and let's focus on water. Wayne brought this up. Let me just get a sip of water. Good idea. I'm not from Florida, but I am evaporating right there.
You did sleep in a Holiday Inn Express
That's
last
right.
night.
So this is going to be a quick tour sort of water issues out in the western United States. But here we're looking at the desert Southwest, where we have very important snowpack in the winter that supplies water year-round through the Colorado River drainage. We can look at this off-axis and realize in red lines, it might be a little hard to show, are very important distribution canals for water feeding the entire region. So what happens here in this basin is really important for the whole western United States. And what we see here is projected decreases in precipitation from global circulation models for the Colorado Basin. We've already seen severe drought since 2002 in the western United States. And this was a wake-up call to water managers. I think we can all relate to the Lake Mead images with the lowering of the bathtub rings. Alongside the lowering water levels is increase in population. So, the United States apparatus to monitor drought is very important for people. In the western United States, agriculture is a very important land use. In Colorado, it's giving way to municipal sources, and farmers are starting to look to dry land methods for farming.
Hey, Ned. Excuse me one second. I just want to have a question for you. The graphics that you're showing here in the presentation, I mean, they're really nice. Are these graphics that the folks in the room, I know you might get to it, but are these kind of graphics the graphics that broadcasters can get access to use?
Thanks, Dave. Yes. This is actually a production that I worked with museums to produce. The Denver Museum of Nature and Science put together a 1-hour show for people in Denver to understand their own relationship to water issues. So they used our climate information, but they brought it together with educational information from water education centers around the country. They're really trying to change their focus as a museum to help people understand their city, their place where they live, and the relationship to climate. So, yes, you can definitely get all of these graphics through me, but also you can check out their work at the Worldviews Network. So, one of the things we're interested in the communications and education team at NOAA's Climate Program Office is finding these people who are stepping forward and making big strides in finding new ways to contextualize and help people understand the relationship between climate and their own way of life. I mentioned this basin. So this is Lake Dillon. We're in the watershed of Lake Dillon right now, here at Breckenridge. This is an important storage facility for water that gets routed down to the South Platte River and into Denver. So what happens here in this basin, even though we're in the Colorado River drainage, influences agriculture and municipal needs down in the Front Range. I've recently met a climate modeler and climate researcher named Lorna Katz. This is really bad.
That's all right, just take a drink.
So, Lorna works with Denver Water, which is a water utility. And after that 2002 drought, she realized, and the whole utility realized, that they're extremely vulnerable to these spates, these long spates of drought, because that means that their municipal supplies dwindle over time. Thank you very much. Sure. And that was really a wake-up call. And they developed a climate research and applications team that Lorna is a principal member of. She's now working directly with the research community in climate research, applying climate models and looking at the social decisions we can make around water use so that we can manage the Dillon Reservoir for multiple uses. That's one example. Moving up the Front Range, up here in Fort Collins, the mayor there has been recognized nationally for her efforts to adapt to climate variability. She has a sustainability officer who headed up an environmental design group, and she hired him away from private practice. I don't know how she did that. And he's now in government. They've implemented, since the 1997 flood, a number of key changes in their regulations. They don't allow certain kinds of loose debris in the floodplain. They don't allow buildings in certain parts of the floodplain. They have voluntary buyback of wild, scenic, natural areas so that the floodplain can accommodate overbank flow of the river, which it will normally do. They have communications and education and outreach in the community so people know where the floodplain is. All of these, they implemented over the last decade or so, and after the September floods, in fact, people of Fort Collins felt like they were much safer during that 1,000-year rainfall event. And it's really being held up as a classic, fantastic example of adapting to climate variability, save lives and property. And so the mayor there and the office there is sharing their knowledge regionally. One of the communities they're working with, they sent an intern up to Estes Park, Colorado, which was cut off from the world by the flooding, which damaged and destroyed the roads coming up the mountain. Of course, that is a terrible impact to their economy, their way of life, and that's due to this extreme precipitation event and the overbank flow of the river, the Big Thompson. So what they're doing in response to that, instead of rebuilding the road with a 20-year horizon, they're thinking 50 and 100 years ahead, understanding the climatology and the return interval of precipitation events and flow events so that they can accommodate the flow of the Big Thompson River and that road will be there in decades to come. So I haven't said climate change, I haven't said climate, really, but they're using climate information to make practical engineering, design, and human safety decisions. And I really think that this community in the room here and online, who you have contact with your communities and your trusted sources. So even if you don't have time on the air during your weather spot to address a climate issue, your people who your community comes to, your opinion matters. Your sense and understanding of climate really matters. When you go to a school, when you do outreach, when you go to a public meeting, your understanding of climate issues is important. And contextualizing that in specific issues around infrastructure and education is critical. So we are building a platform at climate.gov we hope you will come to use our products and services. We have an amazing team of writers, data visualizers, and video production talent, making stories that we feel are going to help you contextualize and tell a better local story. If you haven't come to our site, we do have a news and features section where we provide articles with a little bit deeper dive in plain language, well-written, clear prose about climate phenomena, about the application of climate information to planning, to adaptation. We do featured images where we visualize core climate science data, and we produce videos of the ilk that I've been describing, where we get on the ground and tell an individual person's perspective and how they're starting to realize climate is important in their own words. We bring the perspective from NOAA climate scientists like Deke Arndt, but also, very importantly, here's Allison Adams of Tampa Bay Water. Now, obviously, as Wayne pointed out, climate is an incredibly vast topic. It goes across all scales. For Allison Adams, a seasonal forecast is a critical money-saving device because it determines when she turns on her desalination plant or not. If she has a 1-week lead time or a 2-week or a 1 month, she knows how to staff up for desalination in Tampa Bay, which was the first desalination plant in the United States. The El Nino Southern Oscillation is dollar signs for her. She needs to know whether it's going to be wetter than average or drier than average with some sense of confidence. And that's what seasonal predictions provide. So we told her story from her perspective about how to use seasonal forecasting. Of course, after Sandy, it's a devastating event for a lot of people. And it was reporting on this story that something really dawned on me that probably has dawned on a lot of you. It's that we're at the tip of the spear of understanding and seeing climate change. So of course the public is just beginning to grapple with this topic also. I have a very short clip here I'm going to show in which Patty Hershey, who is an arcade owner there on the boardwalk in Seaside, New Jersey, expressed on camera that she hadn't even thought about sea level rise or the retreat of the beach or the fact that her arcade is on the dune, which is the community's protection from storm surge. And here you'll hear that she's starting to realize, yeah, maybe we should think about sea level rise. So I'm going to play this video now. And actually, I'm going to go backwards so I can start it again from the top. There's going to be audio. community. This is a woman whose business was almost wiped out. The reason she's still in business is that her community supported her. She found someone in her community to reinvest in the business and get it going again. So now she's deeply invested in the idea of long-term planning in a new way. And that's what climate change science, that's where it's very important that we translate it in a way that a community can adapt. And she's talking about how the town is now ready for that conversation. And I suspect all of you in your careers are going to face an example where an extreme event encourages a town to think that way. So Dave, let's, since that didn't work, let's run another story from New Jersey. And this one is about a restaurant owner. I'm going to let the whole thing play. It's a personal story. It might not be the kind of thing you, as meteorologists, personally produce, but you might be asked to advise because it's good content for your audience.
Just a year ago, I finished culinary school and I was looking for a business opportunity, and my wife and I loved Panini Bay Restaurant, and we were just online one day and saw it for sale. So last June 19th, we closed on what we thought was our dream location. We had a restaurant at the shore, and we lived in the apartment above, and we're right on the water in Tuckerton.
The storm left more than 40 people dead in the United States. Millions are still without power, and towns remain flooded.
Climate change models show forecasted for exponential sea level rise into the future, severe storms at high intensities, flash flooding. Our communities need to be prepared for this. We hope to provide them great information to help them be prepared. Superstorm Sandy is one eye-opener for communities.
When we returned after the storm, everything had been completely flooded. Everything on the waterfront side had been destroyed, torn off, everything under the house destroyed. I have a wife and 2 young children, a 3-year-old and an infant. And it's hard to talk about. We want them to grow up here on the water, but the storm really shook things up.
I right now am facing a struggle between teaching people how to be more resilient and think about the future while knowing that emotionally they're dealing with the here and now and what happened to them after the storm.
The first reaction was just to rebuild as quickly as possible. But then as the weeks started to go by, we heard about the base flood elevations were going to change. And then they had links to what the advisory base flood elevation is at the FEMA website. We based some of our building decisions on that. When we elevated, it was the 11 feet plus 3. So it took some extra time. That's how we ended up missing this whole summer season. But I think in the long run, we're building in such a way that hopefully it'll last for 20 years, 25 years at least. And this is the entrance.
Ivor is the perfect example of someone that has made a decision in a more resilient way, thinking about 20, 30 years into the future. After Superstorm Sandy went through, we had been working on a website called the New Jersey Flood Mapper, which shows future inundation due to sea level rise. If you take this and slide it, it starts showing you what at 1 foot of rise.
That's 1 foot?
Yeah. The New Jersey Flood Mapper, we think, is a very powerful tool for helping people think about the future. Whereas FEMA floodplain maps sort of talk about past conditions, our maps look into the future.
What is Green Street under?
When I was working with Ivor, it was obvious that he had not heard about sea level rise yet, that was a new concept to him.
So now we need a boat to get down the street. That's crazy.
And so this is where the water would be at a high tide level. And so that's why we know people should be concerned about this.
The sea level rise is totally new to me. A lot of what you read, they say 6 inches by 2050 or a few inches. So yeah, this is kind of shocking.
If you're thinking about rebuilding, or you're a town official thinking about the future of your town, and you don't want to just look in the rearview mirror all the time, you sort of want to look ahead, we think our mapping tool provides that window into the future and provides good science-based information to help them make an informed decision.
It's shocking that, the sea level rise is 1 foot and the land we're on now is underwater at high tide. It's very informative.
And a little scary.
Yeah. I mean, if it's going to happen in, 20 years, that's not a very long time. I think we're doing the right thing in terms of rebuilding for the future. We didn't want to do anything too short term, and we're going to have a beautiful restaurant that hopefully will, be very successful.
We know that communities, counties, and even the state at this point are using sea level rise data when thinking about future hazards and ways to mitigate for those future hazards. So that makes my job feel important, and it makes me feel like we're doing something that's making a difference.
Which is a NOAA-funded program through the Rutgers University. And there are people like Lisa out there in communities across the country who understand the science and understand how to talk to people. So they haven't been ruined by physical science yet. They can still talk to people. They're like you. They're normal. And I think they're incredibly important for translating this information. It's finding people like Lisa who can relate to someone like Ivor and understand the science and bring it together. I think that's the next wave of communicating climate science. So I'll turn to my friend Greg Fischel from the Raleigh market, and I'm working on my haircut, trying to get the 70s look going. Yeah, this is a television. We probably owned that television when I was a kid. But Greg has been really informative for me in understanding your community, because he was a climate skeptic. He didn't believe the science, but over time, reading and understanding and learning and listening, he's grown to appreciate what's happening with climate change. But his biggest concern in this community is that we keep the dialogue going, that just because you might have an opinion one way or another or made an evaluation of the science for yourself, he wants the dialogue to stay open so that we're not polarized internally in this very important communications community about the science, so that we can keep working on it. Now, he and I like to talk about translating GRADS files and finding data formats, and so he likes to geek out on the data. He is a quintessential weather geek. And I really think that is our common language, is the data, the information, and being able to share that, and that's really what we're about at climate.gov. Greg, one of the highlight stories he wanted to share with me was going to Mount Washington and reporting the conditions on the top of Mount Washington with, 75-mile-an-hour winds and 60-degree below zero temperatures. He was excited by that. And I really think that's the spirit of meteorologists that we want to tap into, get people excited and enthused about the information so they can be safer and make smarter decisions. And that's really where I come from in communicating about climate. So one of the projects we're working on is bringing together diverse sources of information about climate into one platform, the Data Snapshots platform. So here you see 3 different products: the drought monitor, a temperature outlook, and a probability of severe weather. And we're bringing those into one platform with consistent base maps, color ramps that are intuitive, color-blind safe palettes, and we want your input on how to design these things well for your audiences. This is a temperature outlook where we're showing the probability. In this case, every colored category is an above average, a prediction for an above average temperature, and the different colors represent different probability ranges for that prediction. So this is a platform you'd be able to draw on for your own broadcast or blog or maybe social media outlet. We're also having some fun thinking about how to work using teleconferences and do live data visualization using the Earth Systems Research Lab in Boulder's TerraViz tool, where we can have, as Dave Jones described, sort of Hollywood quality visualizations, where we can also embed 3D models of ships and local scale information through a telepresence environment and respond to questions. And we've created this climate challenge, which is a social media way of sort of querying people's understanding of the climate system, collecting their feedback, answering questions, and then you get information about how well you did compared to experts and the rest of the public in estimating some parameter in the climate system. So we're trying to have some fun with social media and understand how and get feedback from the public about their understanding of the climate system. The bottom line here, though, as Cindy reminded me, is your business. In the end, how are you going to grow your business and do better? I think a great example actually comes from WLTX in Columbia, South Carolina, where George Mason and Climate Central helped a station develop new programming. And that's actually helped them expand their market and gain market share. And they really haven't gotten negative feedback on their coverage of climate and climate change. The reason George Mason and Climate Central made it easy, they delivered vetted content, and they were packaged in a way that you can digest and bring into your broadcast very easily. Now, I should throw a shout out to Bernadette, because she is managing this project for Climate Central nationally now, and the plan is to grow from 100, I think you have 111 broadcasters right now, to something like 300 over the next 3 years. That's the plan, through a very similar idea. Now, I think all the credit, though, should go to the news director who had the guts to get behind this idea. And that's Mary Beth Jacoby. I'm going to let her just have a 10-second soundbite here. Oh, that's a shame. Okay, well, there she is. What she said is that people are asking basic questions, and they're experiencing extremes. They can feel climate change, they can feel climate, and they know something's up. And she sees her role as a news director as providing information to her public. And that's fundamentally how I think they've been able to grow their market share during the time when they've been reporting on climate. So I would encourage all of you to please reach out to me. You know where climate.gov is. It's at climate.gov. And you'll be able to find resources. But I also have been listening carefully to the way you digest information and the fact that you have 1.5, 2 minutes on the air to deliver the weather. And I think Wayne and I are both taking away from this meeting the very serious and very real need to work with your trusted sources in the Weather Service to provide climate context around what you're reporting anyway. But just consider, you also sit in a larger societal context. You are trusted sources. So again, Wayne mentioned Ed Maybach and his surveys. One thing that he's demonstrated very clearly is that people trust you about climate information. They trust you because you're on the air every night, and most people watch the news for you. So we want to be a resource for you to learn about climate, and I would encourage you to reach out to me personally if you have any follow-up after the meeting, and of course, I'm here to answer questions now. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Ned, very much. Does anybody have any questions in the room? We're running about 15 minutes long, so we want to make sure we get a break. We're going to take a 10-minute break and not a 15-minute break, but I don't want to step on anybody that may have some questions in the room for Ned.
Blood sugar is speaking.
Okay, that sounds great. I mean, you know, Ned will be here through today, so anybody that has questions can talk to Ned at lunch or during the break. So what we're going to do now, take a look outside live. Everybody loves to see outside, although you're here so you can go outside and experience it, but those folks Still a beautiful day out there in Breckenridge. We'll be right back in about 10 minutes, and we'll have a presentation from Jim White from the University of Colorado, who will talk about abrupt climate change. Please stay with us, and we'll be right back. Thanks so much.